Okay. Okay, sit down. Enough introduction. And how many of you were not here last night? Where were you? We had a great time last night. Oh, but the miracle of CDs. You can pick up a CD of that, right? They do have them here at the church, CDs of last night's service. Yes, you do. Pastor, you do have CDs of the service. Okay. He's already not listening to me. But you can pick up the CDs, and that'll be a great blessing to you. And we did speak on marriage last night and had a great time speaking on the subject of marriage. And so that's available on my website, bobyandian.com. And the book is called One Flesh. It's been one of my best sellers for many, many years, one of the first books I wrote. And that's because my wife and I went through tremendous marriage problems. And he said we've been married for 44 years, of which 34 have been happy. First 10 years were hell on earth, I can tell you that. And I'll tell you some reasons why today. But anyway, we argued so much when we first got married. And anyway, but God blessed us with 2 wonderful kids. They've got married. Now we got 5 wonderful grandkids. And I can tell you this about grandkids. They're your rewards for not killing your kids. And so God has blessed us in that respect. So it's great to have grandkids. And so this is Ross on the front row. Ross, stand up. Let him see you. He's my in-law. So his son married my daughter. And he's from Jacksonville. So we see each other once in a great while. So he's escorting me around, driving me around. I want to thank him for that. And what a great blessing. So how many of you have never seen me before? Okay, well, I've never seen you either. So we're starting off on the same foot this morning, okay? And I want to mention some things on the table. I have a business book out there for $5. This is called God and the Businessman, simply telling you how to treat your employees and your customers like God treats you. And in fact, the book is just basically filled with scriptural principles, how to get a business going without spending any money on advertising. One of the best advertisements you can have out there is keep your word. So many businesses, they don't keep their word. They promise they'll show up, you show up, they never show up. You wonder where in the world they were. And then you try to get hold of them, they're not there. When you finally do get hold of them, they have some excuse to say, well, why couldn't you call me? I sat there waiting on you for the longest time. Anyway, that has many great principles in there about how your business can be blessed and prospered. $5 out there on the table. I have a book out there describing the day we live in. And the little short book of Jude is tremendous on the day we live in. And the excesses in some of the areas of the Word of God that some are teaching. On the other hand, open sin in the church, things like that. He just so nailed it so perfectly and then put the whole thing into a prayer at the end of his short book. And so this CD series is called The Prayer of Jude. That will be a great, great blessing to you. You'll enjoy it. Understanding the end times is not a prediction about when Jesus is coming back. Otherwise, the book would have been old 3 times. So I've had 3 different dates I thought he was coming back on. He let me down every single time. So anyway, this book is out there. It's Old and New Testament combined on the end times, where we fit in end times, what's going on today, and what to expect before the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. This is out there. These are flash drives. Someone said last night, they said they didn't know what this was. It looked like a cassette. And so you open it up, though. This has flash drives on the inside. This is all of the epistles of Peter on one flash drive. And this has 31 lessons. Yeah, 31 lessons on here. And it is $45, but 31 CDs on here. Every verse by verse through all of the epistles of Peter. And this will be a great blessing. Somebody said they went home last night, listened to 4 of them. They're so crystal clear. If you like one of them, this just plugs into your hard drive, into your car. Many cars have flash drive inputs on them. And they wouldn't listen to them. If you really like one lesson, you can email it to somebody. I mean, it's just incredible, the technology today. And if you'd like to become a partner with me, there's some cards out there on the table. Whatever you can do on a monthly basis will be greatly appreciated. My ministry has really never left the local church. I've left the local church, but I am a pastor. I am a pastor to pastors. But what God has called me to do today is minister not only in churches like this, not only in ministers' conferences like Andrew has a couple of times a year, but also to Bible school students. I love students because to me, listen, if you can't minister to a student, there's something wrong with you. They paid to come. They left their homes, they left everything, and they pay to be there. And if you can't preach to them, no wonder they shout and rejoice so much, because they take everything you say, write it down, and they're going to preach it someday, live by it. So again, you can partner with me out there on the table. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So open your Bibles, if you would, to Genesis, the 2nd chapter. I'm kind of going to continue where I left off last night, but head off in a little different vein. I want to talk to you today about one of the biggest questions people have for me whenever I go to churches to minister, go sit with students, whatever, and that is, how do I find the will of God? And even people who have been in Christianity for a long time still wondering, how do I find the will of God? What am I supposed to do? And so we're going to talk about it today, and we're going to kind of take up where we left off last night again, like I said. I have a minister friend in Tulsa, and my wife and I met in church. We were singing in the choir together. I was at college, Oklahoma State University. My sister called me one weekend and said, before the weekend got there, she said, a girl just joined the church this week. She's in the choir. I think she's going to be your wife. I told her to bug off, get out of my life. She wasn't there to tell me who I was supposed to marry. And when I came to church and saw this girl, I thought, well, maybe my sister's right. And we knew we were right from the moment we met. And so we stayed at that church for a while. After we were married, we stayed at the church for a while. Then our church began out of it. And so for a couple of years, we were at that church, and we left that church and started the church that I pastored for 33 years. I wasn't the first pastor, I'm the third pastor, but I was at Rhema during that time. But anyway, when we left that church, we loved the music director and the pastor, but the music director really made a hit in that church. And so when the pastor wasn't there, the music director would preach. So later on, the music director left the church, went to another Assembly of God church, ended up moving out of state. Then he came back later and taught at Rhema for a while. And then he went to another church. And so all those years, the original pastor was still at that church, the church that my wife and I met at. And so eventually, though, he retired and eventually he died. But at the time when he retired, they approached the music director and asked him, would you come back to the church and become the pastor? This was years after he had left. And so he said he prayed about it. He thought, well, yes, the Lord talked to him and instructed him to go back and become the pastor. So he did, but he was shocked when he came back to the church. It was just old people. They had not ever opened up the door to young people. They didn't want young people. They didn't want to grow as a church. When he came back, he said most of the people sitting there were there when he left years ago, just a lot older. The board was 80% of the same people that were there when he was there as the board of the church. And he came in and he said, man, I saw I had my work cut out for me. We had to bring some young people into the church. But he said the other thing that struck him, though, was the fact that this was a pastor's dream. I went to lunch with him one day. I said, how is it a pastor's dream? He said, everything's paid for. The building's paid for. They bought property next door. It's paid for. The houses that were on the property, they fixed up for missionaries to come into town and stay there. He said, those are all paid for. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in a bank. He said, this is a pastor's dream. He said, or at least I thought it was. He said, so I started preaching on the fact that we needed some help. He said, these old people just sat there. Every Sunday they'd come and sit there and they go home. Wednesday night they'd come and sit there and go home. We had no ushers. We had no greeters. We had no children's workers because we had no children's department. We had no youth workers because we had no youth department. He said, I couldn't get anybody to do anything. So he just said after about a month, I decided I'm going to teach a whole month on getting involved in the church. He said, I took the first week and talked about greeters and ushers. I took the next week and talked about music department, and the next week about children's department, then youth department. I had a whole month's worth of sermons laid out. He said, I'd preach those sermons, get so excited. We need greeters at the door. Man, when somebody comes in the front door, we need somebody with a smiling face to say, welcome to the presence of God. Come into church because today's going to change your life. He talked about how that one smile, one word from you can open up a person's life to receive from the pulpit, receive from the message of God, receive from praise and worship, to leave from there with needs met and bodies healed. He talked about that. He said after that sermon was over, nobody volunteered for anything. Next week, he said, I preached on getting involved in the music part. We need you up here singing. We need the choir filled again. He went down the list of things. He said, everybody sat there and nobody got involved. Third week, said nothing again, nothing for children. He said, but finally, by the third week, I noticed something. Every time I spoke on getting involved in church, the offerings went up. I thought that was strange. So he said a week later, he went to the board meeting. He said, come on, guys, explain to me. I asked people to get involved. Nobody gets involved, but the offerings go up. Why do the offerings go up? And the board said, go hire them. He said, go hire them? They said, yes. That's what we're giving money for. You're the pastor, go hire. He said, you mean bring in strangers from the outside and just hire them to be ushers? They said, yes, because we're not going to do it. And he said, you know what struck him at that point? He said, I thought a successful church was one that had all its bills paid and money in the bank. He said a successful church is people helping people. Yes. So I missed the whole point. So I realized something. You're not going to take your money to heaven with you. We're not going to take all those homes we had built. We're not going to take the building to heaven. What we're going to take to heaven is people we helped. And folks, we don't start out there. We start in here. The Bible says, do good to all men, but especially those of the household of faith. This is where you prove your ministry. This is where you're faithful. What God's looking for is not talented people. God's not looking for qualified people. You think we're going to stand in heaven, he's going to say, well done, good and qualified servant? You think we're standing in heaven, he's going to say, well done, you that know all, no. He's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant. The Bible says, above all, it's required of a steward that you be found faithful. Paul said, God put me in the ministry, not finding me full of information from the Old Testament, although this guy was probably the best knowledgeable guy in the Old Testament. That's not what got him into the ministry. It's not your degree from CBC. I'm sorry, CBC is a great school, but that's not what's going to promote you in the ministry. We got lots of Rhema grads with Rhema diplomas hanging on the wall that are still wondering when their ministry is going to find them. But the point of it is, it's not a diploma on the wall. Paul said to Timothy, find faithful men among you who shall be able to teach others also. Faithfulness, faithfulness, faithfulness. The key to everything is faithfulness, faithfulness, faithfulness. It's what he's looking for. Faithfulness doesn't begin out there. Faithfulness begins in the house of God. This is where it starts. Look around you. There's people here, but people say, yeah, but I would get involved, but we got plenty of ushers. No church ever has enough ushers. Never. Well, there's plenty of people singing in the music part. There's never enough. We never have enough children's workers. We never have enough youth workers. Never. You may look around and think we're just overstocked with workers, but we're not. There's always room for you. I grew up in church. We had a hymn called There's Room at the Cross for You. Folks, though millions have come, there's still room for one. I can tell you we've probably had millions of ushers, but there's still room for you to be an usher or a greeter or do something to help people in the church of God. This is where it starts. Amen. My dad pastored at a time from the time I was in kindergarten all the way till the time I was in junior high school. My dad pastored 3 churches. And it was at a time period back in the mid to late 50s, early 60s and all that people just thought we hired the pastor, so he's supposed to do everything. That's what his money's for. Mm-hmm. My dad was running around all the time, visiting everybody in the hospital. He was visiting people in prison. I mean, he was at the door shaking hands with them when they came in, greeting them when they went out. And I'm friendly, but they thought we're paying you to do this, and the people would do nothing. If they needed something done, they'd call him on the phone, say, my neighbor needs witnessing, go talk to them. My dad was running around doing all this stuff, not realizing that the purpose of the church is to perfect the saints to go do the work of the ministry. And here's where it starts, here in church, getting involved in the things of God. You're there in Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. Look with me at verse 21. The Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh around it, and from the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made a woman, and brought her to the man. Now this is a wonderful verse. We talked about it last night. But the point of it is, does anybody remember what Adam had been doing before this point that was here last night? Naming animals, okay? Working in gardening. Go back with me to verse 15, because here it tells us what he'd been doing. And the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. So he was to work it, till it, cut back, prune it, do all the things that you have to do. And then next of all, to guard it, because there was an enemy out there called Satan. He was to guard it. And then look with me at verse 20. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, to the birds of the air, to every animal of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper for him of his own species. Again, as he named the animals, they came to him. All the animals came in twos. And they all had a helper of their own species. The elephants came, 1, 2. They turned around and walked off. Adam would go, 1. Every time the animals came, birds came. No matter what came, everything was 1, 2, 1. Something wasn't right here. He had no helper of his own species. Every animal did. And so he kept waiting for the right time. Again, we pointed out something to you last night. Adam was not lonely. Woman was inside of him. Remember, he carried both of them until she was finally taken out of him. A body was made for her, and Adam said she's woman because she was taken out of man. He carried her for a long time. Now, at that point, understand something, he had no capacity to be lonely. All right? Now, he was not a freak. Again, okay, remember that. We pointed this out last night. Some kind of weirdo, cross-dresser, whatever. He was not that, okay? He was not a bisexual or anything like that. He was complete in himself, had no capacity to be lonely, but yet he kept wondering, why is everything in twos and I'm one? And then God took the woman out and made her. But again, he was seeing all this happen, all this come to pass. And at that time, as he was here in this verse of Scripture, there was no helper for him. So what happened? Well, let's go back to that verse of Scripture again, verse 21. The Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, closed up the flesh around it. From the rib which the Lord God had taken from the man, he made a woman and brought her to the man. I want to give you 4 points on finding a mate. All right, young people, 4 points on finding a mate. Divorced people, 4 points on finding a mate. Those of you not interested at all, 4 points on finding a mate. The first 2 was Adam, the next 2 was God. The first 2 points is Adam, the next 2 points is God. The first one was Adam was working, guarding the garden, tilling it, naming animals before Eve was made. Okay, he was working. Point number 2, as far as looking for a mate, he went to sleep. Quit thinking about it all the time. Quit making it the number 1 thought in your mind. When's it ever going to happen? Quit making it your first thought in the morning, your last thought at night, and everything revolving around it. Point number 1, get to work in the church, begin helping Christians, doing the will of God. Point number 2, when it comes to finding a mate, just go to sleep. Thank you for the rousing amen on that one. Point number 3, God made a woman for him. She was the exact one for him. God made her while he was sleeping. So God took time. We don't know how long he was asleep. Again, we pointed this out last night. He could care less. He was asleep. Okay? But God brought the right thing, the woman to him. And point number 4 was God didn't hide Eve. He brought her to Adam. Point number 1, Adam was working. Point number 1 for you, get to work in the church. Quit making finding a mate the most important thing in your life. Quit wondering, fretting, when's it ever going to happen? Quit looking at every guy that walks in going, is that him? Is that him? Every woman that walks in, is that her? Is that her? No. Get to work helping people. Point number 2, when it comes to finding a mate, go to sleep. Leave that in God's hands. You just do what God's told you to do and forget about it. Point number 3, God will make the right one for you. And point number 4, you don't have to run around from church to church, youth group to youth group, singles group to singles group, running from church to church, looking for the right one. God will bring that right one to you. How often do people run from church to church, youth group to youth group, looking for the right one? Well, maybe they're here. Maybe, did you ever stop to think about this? What if you're here and you've looked around and there's no one here, or you think there's not? And then you run off to another church, and the Sunday you run off to that church, that person comes here looking for you. Okay, and pretty soon you're all over. Yeah. Here's a word for you. Stand still and watch the deliverance of the Lord. Okay? Just stand still. God knows where you are. You don't have to run around chasing them. But God has a plan. This is what God did. This was God's plan for bringing the two together. But the book of Ecclesiastes says this: God has made man upright, but he, that is man, has sought out many inventions. We try to improve the plan of God. God has a perfect plan for your life, but you're always interjecting your finger in there and messing up God's plan. Don't look at me so pious. Every one of you have done exactly the same thing. You've had to come back and repent. Jesus, forgive me for trying to mess up your plan and adding me to the mix. Grace is letting God do what he's supposed to do, and your part is faith, which is just cooperating with the grace of God. And let God be God. Let God find it. So when it comes to finding a mate, young people, those of you still waiting for Mr. Right or Miss Right to come into your life, for those of you, understand something. God has a perfect plan. Quit trying to mess it up. In other words, Match.com. How about this one? ChristianMingle.com. I have not figured that one out. They promise you they will find God's perfect mate for you. How do they know? My question is, what did God do before the computer came out? When the PC was invented, did God look at Jesus and go, "Whoa, thank God, man, now we can finally get people together"? God has been putting people together for millenniums putting them together. But we always have a better idea. Let me tell you how those computer, those websites operate. You fill out the questionnaire, and they take your questionnaire and they put it up next to other questionnaires and try to find somebody as close to you as possible. They have your likes over here and dislikes, and they put someone else's likes and dislikes, and they put the two together. You know what that's called? Boring. To find somebody exactly like you. How many can vouch for it? You and your husband, you and your wife are complete opposites. Look at that. That's what makes life exciting. That's what makes life exciting. Or hell on earth until you finally figure that out. My wife and I had hell on earth for the first 10 years. I kept trying to make her like me, and she kept trying to make me like her. She kept trying to tell me why she did what she did. I kept trying to tell her what I did, and trying to get her to understand me. And we fought for 10 years and came to the point where we were ready to leave. Just ready to walk out on each other. Couldn't take it anymore. Till finally a minister one time sat down with us till 4 a.m, helping us, getting us pointed in the right direction, and said, guys, just enjoy the difference. Quit trying to make them like you. Life would be boring if everybody was just like you. Why does God put opposites together? To help you see through the eyes of somebody else and expand your whole vision on life. And you're free to be yourself. And they're free to be themselves. Just understand God put you together. I know the things don't somehow seemingly go together. My wife and I are such opposites. She's a night person. I'm a day person. 10:30 at night. That's what I do. I can barely make it down the hall. There's times I thought, please don't let me pass out in the hall. I have to make it to the bed. I finally lay down in bed. There's times my wife and I going to bed at the same time. In the middle of a sentence, I'm out. Not my sentence, her sentence. She's talking to me. I'm snoring in just a few moments. Man, I can sleep easy. I get on a plane and boom, I'm out. And, at home I'm the same way. I thought it was a gift. I thought it was a blessing one day. I was telling my doctor for a physical, one year. He said, describe yourself. I said, man, I'm so blessed. I can sleep anywhere, anytime. He said, no, that's not a blessing. It's called a slow metabolism. Yes, I do have that. I thought it was a blessing. He said, no. So anyway, but at 10:30, when I'm ready to go to sleep, my wife wakes up. Her eyes open up wide. She'll stay up till 2, 3 in the morning, reading, watching movies, things like that. And then, of course, she sleeps till 11 or 12 every day. But that's just the way I know good and well don't call her before 11 o'clock because she's in bed. So anyway, we're just opposites in that respect. Our music, such difference. And she loves classical. I like classic rock. She likes Beethoven. I like roll over Beethoven. We're just different when it comes to music. Movies. Come on, girls. Do you girls really like those Hallmark movies?
Yes.
Oh, come on. They're so cheesy. I can't believe it. I watch them with my wife, but I got the plot figured out in 5 minutes. I tell her she's going to fall for him and his dog. Watch it. It's going to happen. And sure enough, before the end of the movie, they fall for each other. That's the way it always is. And Christmas and Hallmark, they just go together. From the time November rolls around, she's already anticipating Hallmark. Because she's down there in the bedroom. She'll watch her Hallmark movies one after another in the bedroom. And I can hear her down in the bedroom like, and I ask her why. And she says, they're romantic movies. They're just so romantic. I said, honey, let me tell you what a romantic movie is. It's a man standing beside a 1968 Hemi Charger. On this arm, he's got a girl he just rescued. And in this arm, he's got a sawed-off double-barrel smoking shotgun. And all around him are a dozen dead bad guys laying on the ground. And the credits come rolling up the screen. That's a love story. To me, that's what it is. We are just complete opposites. But notice that God put us together. And when we start to enjoy each other's differences, now she'll go see a few of those boom, bang movies with me, and I'll watch a few Hallmark movies with her. There's times we come together on that. But in the meantime, we just learn to enjoy each other. And slowly through the years, listen, you're immediately one when you get married, but becoming one takes time.
Yeah.
Okay? God joined us together spiritually when we got married, but from that time and learning to be one and think like one, and all that just takes time. So we find that again. And so, Christian Mingle, all these other ones. I'd like to start a website, call it mismatch.com. I think I could have more success. I have some girls in our church, and again, if you've gone for it, she got onto Christian Mingle. She said, I've had 4 dates. She said, the first dates are awesome. We find, we've got so much in common, but by the second or third date, we realized we ran out of things to talk about because everything we talked about was things we enjoy, and there's nothing else outside of that. And so God puts people together. I have found in marriages, not only that, but even in ministry teams that God puts together, he puts opposites together. Paul and Peter. Paul and Barnabas, they fought. From the very first time they went out, they fought over John Mark. And so, but learning to work with each other is so important. Paul straightened Peter out in front of an entire congregation, but they were the best friends. Elijah and Elisha were total opposites. And, one was a flamboyant miracle worker in front of the crowds. The next one was a miracle worker, but he mainly ministered around the school of the prophets with students. Again, just total opposites, but God put them together. It expands your horizon to look through someone else's eyes and see the world as they see it. So my daughter was, both my kids are raised in Christian school, and just did outstanding. My son was just this natural-born student. He loved studying and graduated from Oklahoma University in 3 years. Just incredible how much he knew. But my daughter hated school. Couldn't wait to get out of it. She was not a student, did not want to be a student. In fact, she couldn't wait till she graduated because she just wanted to get a job, meet a guy, have kids. She just wanted to be a mother, housewife. And so by the time she was a junior in high school, the English teacher said to her one day, she said, where are you going to go to college? She said, I'm not going to go to college. And she just looked shocked and said, you're not going to go to college? She said, no. She said, well, how will you ever meet a husband? My daughter thought, what? Because we've taught her all of her life. God will bring the right one to you, And, she did. And pretty soon, here came, Ryan into her life. God brought Ryan to our church, and that's where they met. She waited on the Lord. So it comes back to it that if you wait on God, he will bring the right one to you, and you don't have to run from church to church to church. And so often I have seen young people, I have seen teenagers, I've seen early 20s just running all over the place thinking, well, I've exhausted them here, maybe they're over here, and you run. When it really comes back to this, God will bring that mate to you. We had a young man at our church that attended Rhema. The time that he came to Rhema, they didn't have a church. And so Rhema just told the students, find good churches in town and become involved. So he came to our church one week and didn't tell me this. He only came to scout out the girls. That's the reason he came. He's getting his education at Rhema. He was going to come here to our church and look at the women. So he did. And but on the second week he was there, I taught on this subject in marriage and taught about the fact that God brought the woman to Adam. Adam was just to get involved doing what God wanted him to do. And I said, this is the place to get involved. And as you do, one day you'll wake up and there she'll be, or there he'll be. God will bring them. So he said, he honestly told me that. He said, that Sunday I grew up. He said, I've been so immature. I took my responsibility on me. Instead of sitting in church, I was going to become involved in people's lives. He became an usher. He became a greeter. After his 2 years at Rhema, he went 2 years to our ministry school. And the second year he was there, he met the secretary of the school, and they fell in love. They got married, and now both of them together run one of the largest missions organizations in the entire United States, just outside of Tulsa, and it's called Voice of China and Asia. He runs that whole thing. They are so blessed. They've been to the mission field so many times, and he still says, that's the Sunday I grew up, was when I accepted responsibility and decided to become faithful, helping people instead of looking at me, looking for what I wanted and chasing after it. You ever think about this? Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these other things will be added to you, including a mate. We had a girl one time, this is one of my favorite stories, but this girl was one of those eternal cheerleaders, That was her whole life. She was in her 30s, and she was, she was part of our praise and worship group, and boy, could she bring the house down. She always had a smile on her face. She was the first one dancing, rejoicing, hands up on the platform. And she'd been to our church for a couple of years, and she came to my wife and I one day and said, well, I'm going to leave the church. And we said, why? And she said, honestly, I've scouted out all the guys here at church, and the good ones are taken. There's not a good one left. I've been to the singles group, don't want those guys. And, she said, and I've looked around here, and I said, look, don't. I said, why don't you make a stronger commitment to the church than ever before? Forget about a guy And I said, let's turn it over to the Lord. There's a story in the Bible where Isaac needed a wife, and Isaac wanted a wife, but he stayed tending the fields, and he sent his servant out to find one. Yeah. You have a servant called the Holy Spirit. Send him out. And even his servant went to a foreign country and found Rebekah and brought her back. Yeah. So the point of it is, if God has to go to Timbuktu to find you somebody, he will. He knows you better than you know you, and he knows somebody will fit you better than you. Throw your list away. Especially girls, throw your list away. When I was at Raymond, we had girls, they'd bring me the list of what they were believing for, and I looked at that list one day and told the girl, I said, honey, I don't think Jesus would qualify with this list of what you want out of a guy. I said, let me tell you what happens. When the right one comes along, you'll know down here he's the right one, but don't be shocked if he's not a thing like you think he should be. Because God knows best who will fulfill you 20 years from now, 30 years from now. He knows how your lives will be pulled together, and if he's different than you, that'll be the key thing. So, anyway, Rebecca came, and I told her that story. I said, listen, he sent out, let's all of us agree right now, you, me, and Loretta, let's all agree that God's going to find someone for you and bring you here, but you just make up your mind, you're going to stay here tending the fields. Okay, that's what he did. And you just do that. And she said, well, okay. She wasn't too happy about that, but she said, okay. So I said, dig your heels in more, get more involved in music, get more involved in people's lives and God. It wasn't a week later, not at the church, but a week later, there was a young man in Arkansas framing homes. And God spoke to him and said, leave here and go to Tulsa. He said, why? Man, my business is booming. All my friends are here. He argued with God for a month. And finally, after a month, he shut his building business down, moved to Tulsa, and hit the ground running when he got to Tulsa. The homes were booming in Tulsa. He was framing homes from the time he got there. And I mean, he's never lost a step moving from Arkansas to Tulsa as far as business was concerned. He said, I missed my friends, I missed my church and all that. He says, I was wondering, what am I doing here? He said, a month later, I was questioning God as I was driving down the street to go frame a home in a new housing addition. I was driving down the street questioning God. He said, I looked up and he said, I saw your church sitting up there, and God said, go there this Sunday. He said, okay. So that Sunday he came and was escorted to a seat, and the seat he was escorted to was right on the aisle, the very end seat on the aisle. Well, right across the aisle in the first seat on the next aisle, across the aisle was her. She wasn't singing in praise and worship that week. We had groups, and we had teams, and so her team wasn't up that week. She was out there, and it was during praise and worship. Both of them had their hands lifted up to Jesus, and this is the story they tell. They looked at each other, and then, I mean, just like that. She looked, he looked, then they didn't look, then they looked, They were praising Jesus, and pretty soon I said to the congregation, well, let's join hands for prayer. And they did. They walked out in the aisle, joined hands, and by the time service was over, they were talking. They had each other's phone numbers. They were going out for coffee, and they dated for a year, and after a year, he proposed to her. Within another year, they were married, and they ended up going to the Philippines as missionaries together. Oh, what a tremendous story that is. But it all comes back to this: stand still and watch the deliverance of the Lord. Get involved helping people. That's exactly what happened in the case of Adam. He just got busy working for God. God put him to sleep during the time he was asleep. God made the woman. When Adam woke up, God didn't say, I hid her behind a tree, put her in a cave somewhere, go running around looking for her. And we often think that. Here I am sitting at this church, and Mr. Wright's at that church. No, if he's Mr. Right, he'll bring him here and bring him to you. And that's, again, the story there of how that happened. Let me give you some stories, again, from the Word of God. Isaac and Rebekah is Genesis 24, where a servant was sent out to find a wife, and then he brought her back to him. You have a servant called the Holy Spirit. And again, when she was brought back, from the time that she jumped off that camel, their eyes met, they knew they were right for each other. I don't believe in love at first sight. I believe in knowing at first sight. But I don't believe in love at first sight, because love takes understanding. Love takes time. Love has to be built on trust. And so learning to love each other is important. But again, that's what happened. In Genesis chapter 29, God brought Rachel to Jacob. Jacob went to work for his father-in-law tending sheep, and that's where he met his father-in-law's daughter, and that's where they fell in love, and he worked for many years to get her. But again, that's in Genesis 29, where Jacob became a shepherd. I love this story. Of course, you're familiar with it, but Ruth, the book of Ruth. Ruth is a tremendous story. Ruth was a Moabitess, a part of a cursed nation. Moab was cursed because they wouldn't let Israel cross their territory when Israel was in the desert. And so Moses approached the king of Moab and said, can we cross your country because it'll be shorter to go this way than to go all the way around. And said, we promise when we go through there, we will walk down your roads, but we will not take an apple off a tree. We will not take any corn. We will just walk straight through. And the king said, no, you can't. So a curse came on that nation. The Moabites were a cursed people. Of course, you know the story, how that Ruth married a young man that came over from Israel. He died, and she stuck with the mother-in-law. And the mother-in-law said, well, I'm going back to Israel. You can stay here. She said, no, I'm going back with you. I've learned to love you. I've accepted your God. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. I'm going to stick with you. And she came back to Israel and lived there. But the first thing she did was she didn't go looking for a husband. She got a job. She was just picking, the gleanings from the field. And she did that day after day. And one day, by accident, there's no accidents with God, okay? She was working the field of Boaz. And Boaz was, looking across his field and saw her, and immediately that's like, I like that. He said to those around him, who is she? And they said, she's a Moabitess. Like that would really turn him off. Didn't affect him one bit because she was a Moabitess. He said, tell you what, guys, he said, she's gleaning back there. Leave handfuls for her. Don't you, in fact, leave a lot for her back there. And so, suddenly she went from grabbing a few, handfuls a day to suddenly basketfuls a day. And she was wondering what happened here. She'd go home and bring them to her mother-in-law. And here they were overflowing with wheat and everything else that they needed for everything. Not understanding until one day Boaz arranged to meet her. Of course, they fell in love. The whole story is just incredible how they fell in love. And then he asked her to marry him. I have to take a little liberty here. I taught a series on this. I had to take a little liberty. Why did he not care that she was a Moabitess? She cared. I'm sure her first thing to him was, why would you want to fall in love with me and marry me? I'm a Moabitess. I'm under a cursed race. How do you know no matter what the curse, when you get born again, curses are gone? Amen. Hallelujah. And so here she had accepted the Lord. She said, you've accepted me into your nation. I find out now you're the one that left handfuls back there for me in the field. You've so blessed me. You're one of the richest men in the entire nation. I'm just a Moabitess woman that's come here as a pauper, just gleaning from the field. Why? Why do you want to marry me? I am a cursed woman. And he said to her, come meet my mother. I don't want to meet your mother. I just want to know why I'm such a, come meet my mother, you'll understand. So, okay, well, let's go meet your mother. So he took her home to meet his mother. And so he introduced her, probably to her father. This is all me. If I'm wrong, Jesus will straighten me out when I get to heaven. This is my imagination as to what happened. He took her home, met his father, and he said, Mom, why don't you meet this woman I fall in love with? Her name is Ruth. Ruth, I want you to meet my mother, Rahab. Rahab, I've heard that name before. Well, you should have. You think you were cursed, honey? She came out of a nation where she was a prostitute. She came out of a nation that was totally cursed. But when she accepted the Lord, not only was she redeemed, her family was redeemed, and she's come out, and honey, she's now my mother. I want you to understand something. Not only was Rahab, but Ruth also, a Moabitess. All this came from Matthew chapter 1, the genealogy there. Both of them are in the bloodline of the Lord Jesus Christ, our Redeemer. When God redeems you, He really redeems you. What a background she came out of. But again, it all came down to this. God arranged for the two to come together, and she became the great-great-great-grandmother of David himself. So it's all recorded there. So again, God arranged for the two to get together. Don't you know she would have never, if she had been going from church to church looking for a guy, she'd have never thought about the richest guy in the nation, but God had that planned. Honey, hang on. You don't have no idea what blessing God has for you. Good preaching, Bob. Thank you. Thank you. That's really good. Well, I know what some of you are thinking, yeah, but I thought this sermon was on finding your call. I've been waiting through this whole thing. You've been talking about marriage. I'm already married. Happily married, somewhat happily married, married. But anyway, all the different types of marriages we might have. But on the other hand, you're thinking, but I am married. That's not what you said. You were going to talk about finding the will of God. How do I find the will of God? the same way. I want to give you 4 points on finding the will of God. Number 1, get to work in the church. Number 2, go to sleep as far as finding the will of God. Don't make it your everyday waking thing in the morning, closing at the end of the day, all day long. When will I ever find the will of God? When will I ever find the will of God? Point number 3, and that is God will find the will of God, make it perfectly for you. And point number 4, you won't have to run around from church to church, seminar to seminar, Andrews conferences after Andrews conferences here and there. You won't have to do that anymore. Point number 4, he will bring his will right into your house and drop it in your lap. That's how the will of God comes. It's the same way. Turn to 1 Kings. Turn to 1 Kings chapter 19. 1 Kings chapter 19. Elijah's being a jerk. Now, none of you have ever been that, but he was being a jerk at this time. And being a jerk, he literally was trying to manipulate God. God was trying to send him back where he was supposed to be, which was in Jerusalem, being the prophet. Cave, feeling sorry for himself, and God's been instructing him to try to get him to get up out of there and go back to Jerusalem, but he won't. And his whole thing is, Lord, they've torn down your altars. They don't love you anymore. They're worshiping Baal. And listen to this, and I only am the only one serving you. God said, well, let's go back to Jerusalem then and turn this situation around. No. And he started all over again. Second time, Lord, everybody's torn down your altars. They're all worshiping Baal. No one loves you anymore, just me. I and I only am the only one. And finally God said, that's it, Elijah, it's over. You won't listen to me. So your ministry's over. And I'm going to put somebody else in your place. And when you find him, he's going to be plowing. Notice that he'll be working. He'll be plowing. You'll find him plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. His name is Elisha. His father is this. He lives in Abel Maholah. He goes down the list of things. Here's how you'll find him. And he's going to take your place. And oh, by the way, Elijah, just to let you know, there's 7,000 out there that haven't bowed their knee. And he's just one of those 7,000 that I've been looking at. The thing that struck me about him is he's working. He's not on his knees praying and not all these other things. He's working. Folks, Elisha had probably been praying. But notice this, there's praying and there's working. God didn't approach him while he was praying. God approached him while he was working. Prayer is fine, but prayer makes you sensitive so that when God does cross your path, you'll recognize him. But he looks for people that are working. Think on these things. Because you ask most people, how are you going to find the will of God? They say, well, I've been in my prayer closet. That's fine. Prayer is important, but get up and do something. God looks for doers, not prayers. For all you intercessors that are mad at me now. Intercessory prayer is fine. All these other things are fine. But when God looks and finds somebody, they're always working. Do you ever think about that? They were always working. Look what it says here in verse 19. He, that is Elijah, departed from there, that is the cave, and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, he with the 12th. And Elijah passed by him and threw his mantle on him. Elisha had been waiting for this day. But he wasn't sitting and waiting. He wasn't sitting rocking on the front porch waiting. All right? He was out plowing and waiting. And while he was plowing, Elijah came and threw the mantle around him. He knew exactly what that meant, and he ran off and left the oxen. In fact, he said, wait just a moment, ran back and actually slew one of the oxen and made it a sacrifice unto the Lord to show he was burning his bridges behind him. He was not about to go back to plowing again. And he went off and followed Elijah. Probably, most authors tell us it was 8 to 10 years he followed Elijah. Learning from him. And then he picked up and continued and fulfilled Elijah's ministry. Elijah never finished his ministry. Elisha finished Elijah's ministry. Those two made up one ministry. In fact, the last miracle of Elijah, the parting of the Jordan River, was the first miracle Elisha did by parting the Jordan River. So he picked up where Elijah left off, and he continued his ministry, did twice as many miracles as Elijah did, but he picked up where he left off. But again, when he found him, he was working. And so we find it in the Old Testament. Moses was shepherding when he found the burning bush. Now, had he been praying? Of course he'd been praying. Had he been wondering what God was going to do? Yes, he had. But when God approached him, he was shepherding. When God approached David, he was shepherding. The point of it was, I mean, the prophet came to his house, and here with 6 sons standing in front of him, all standing there with all their degrees, ROTC, all of them involved in the military, and they were flaunting themselves, and Dad was flaunting themselves, and after coming to all 6 of them and starting to lay hands on every one of them, God told the prophet Samuel, nope, nope, nope. And finally, when he got to 6, he said, "You got any more?" He goes, "Yeah, but he's working. He keepeth the sheep." What a, you could read the disdain in his word. He keeps the sheep. Probably smells like the sheep, looks like the sheep. You can come in here and probably have, wool hanging off. He's just going to be, covered with dirt. Where, we have him out there working, and that's exactly what God's looking for. He's not looking for the clean-cut guy that, got all the degrees and got your CBC hanging on the wall. Those things are fine. When God approaches you, I don't care if you got a CBC hanging on the wall. He wants to see if you're ushering at the front door. He wants to see if you're greeting when you come in. He wants to see if you're teaching children. He wants to see if you're working with teenagers. That's the ones he's looking for, because that's the one God always called for my church and sent into the ministry, were those that were my best helpers in the church. Oh, I argued with God about that. God, it's taken me 7 years to get this guy to this point. He's the finest usher I've got. In fact, he's my head usher. Now you're calling him over to Manila? What are you doing, God? God, I've got 100 out there I'd gladly give you. My Lord, I pray every week they'll leave. They're still here. You take my best, you take my finest. Every time you take one, it's somebody that we've worked on, and now they're so sold out to the church, they'll do anything for the moment. I said, if we attack hell with squirt guns, they'd go grab a squirt gun. That's what they want to do. They just want to help me. They're so faithful, and God said, that's what I'm looking for. I said, but why won't you take these other ones? He told me one day as I was starting to lay hands on my best associate pastor, who had come up from the ranks working with children, working with youth, had been my head usher, had now been my associate pastor for years. We were sending him off, in Wisconsin to become a pastor. I'm thinking, God, man, I need him. And the Lord spoke to me, and I said, but Lord, there's so many out there that, I'd gladly send out. And he said, well, let me ask you a question. Which one do you want 100-fold return on? Okay, I'll send this good one. I'll quit trying to get the trash off on you, and I'll keep the good one here, okay? This is how pastors think. We never say this except when I'm speaking. Okay, we think it, we just don't say it out loud. So it still comes down to it. That's what God's looking for. But oftentimes, listen, I can tell you this, we have Rhema students sitting in Tulsa now for 20 years still waiting on the will of God to fall in their lap, and they won't get involved in anything, wondering why God won't talk to them. Where is God? Where is God? Had a young man in our congregation, incredible young man, but he had just graduated from Rhema, and I understood he was a great photographer, and he attended our church, and I came to him one day and said, listen, I said, I just took the church, and I understand you're a great photographer. And our church, before I took it, was a teaching center. The difference is, in a teaching center, you don't have a great music program, youth program, all that. We come and get taught, we dismiss, and poof, they're out the door. And no one would hang around and talk. No one would fellowship. And so my wife and I came out of a church background. We thought, why can't we have a word-teaching church, but still as a church? So we started instituting all these programs. The church started growing by leaps and bounds, ways to get people involved in helping people, getting to know people, Sunday school classes, youth department, children's department, music, all the different things we had. And this has been going on for months. But one thing I really wanted was a way to communicate with people. We didn't have computers back then. We didn't have Facebook and all this. So I wanted to print every month. You walk in the door the first Sunday of the month, and you got a printed bulletin from last month, and pictures of youth meetings, and pictures of kids being baptized, pictures of things that went all in the church with little blurbs under them, just a way for people to keep up. And I said, all I want you to do is just run to a few places and take pictures. Don't stay there all day. Man, if the youth are having a bowling thing, take a picture of them bowling and get out of there. Next week if we're baptizing, just take a picture of a couple of people being baptized. Just be there at certain times and I'll pay you. I'll get you. He said, no. I said, why not? He goes, I'm called to the mission field. Man, I know it's coming. It's so strong in me. I know it's coming. Man, the phone could ring next week, and I don't want to say yes to you today and then have to desert you next week and head to the mission field. I said, well, okay. I looked and looked, couldn't find another, his photographer as good as he was. That I came back to him about 2 months later and said, you're still here. He said, Yes, I am. He said, I know what you want. You want me to take pictures? He said, it's stronger than me now than it was 2 months ago. I know. I'm going to get a call tomorrow. Probably tomorrow they're going to call from some missions organization, ask me to come and be a missionary. And I said, well, okay. About 2 weeks later, I came to him and said, this is crazy. I need you. He said, yes, but the phone guy said, just shut up. Just a minute, just shut up. I can guarantee you that phone won't ring tomorrow if you won't commit to me today. Unless you commit today to become a faithful worker in the church, God's looking for people doing something, not people sitting on their butt waiting for something to fall out of heaven. That's what God wants. And we have so many doing that. And I said, that door won't open till this. And I said, I guarantee you, if you say yes today and the phone rings next week, between now and next week, you'll have somebody else to take pictures. God will see to it my bases are covered. He said, I never thought about that. So he started taking pictures. You know how long he took pictures in our church? 3 years. 3 years. Some of those incredible pictures. When I left last May, I went into my closet, into my office, and pulled out boxes of pictures he had taken. Most incredible pictures of the services we had. The ORU Maybe Center. The glory of God was there. Oral Roberts was sitting way back in the balcony. Just incredible things and pictures he had taken through the years of ministers at our church and just things like that. And things at the Christian school. All these other things. And I still comment on that today. And when I see him, he still reminds me of that. You know why I'm here? And he has a tremendous ministry today in Yugoslavia. But he's had it in different parts of the world, but now he's based there. And he told me, he said, this all started because you asked me to take pictures. And I finally said, yes, this is what opened up that door. It's not your diploma. It's not how talented you are. It's just taking and becoming involved in the things of God. Just putting your hand to the plow. God will see to it. His will find you. New Testament. Luke chapter 1, Zechariah and Elizabeth had prayed for a child for years, but when God finally approached them, they were working in the temple. They were lighting the lamps that day. Matthew chapter 4, Peter and Andrew were called to be disciples while they were fishing. God was looking for somebody doing something. Matthew chapter 9, Matthew was sitting at the table collecting taxes when he was called by Jesus. Acts chapter 16, verses 1 and 2, Timothy was well reported of. When Paul found Timothy, Timothy was well reported of by everybody for the works that he was doing. The fact he was just helping in churches, was a faithful worker for the things of God, that's what caused Timothy to be called to the ministry. I was at Oklahoma State University when I met my wife. She was in Tulsa. I came back one weekend, we met, and God just began to open up doors. I was in my junior year at Oklahoma State studying for business administration. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with my life. And so since I didn't know, I just took business. Thought I could get into business somehow. But my junior year at Oklahoma State University, the Lord talked to me and told me and impressed on me I would be a teacher of the things of God. And so I couldn't quit studying. I mean, instead of studying my business books, I was studying E.W. Kenyon. I was reading books on, Pentecostal history, on healing, the miracles of God. And I had such a call to the ministry. I went home one weekend and told my dad, I said, I've got to go to Bible school. I'll pay for it. You've been paying for my college education. I will pay for this. If I'm wrong, I'll go back and finish my education. But I said, I've got to get this out of my system. I've got to go to a Bible school and find out if this is really God. From the day I walked into Bible school, I knew I was found at the center of God's perfect will. God spoke to me at the right time and opened up this door. So I sat there for 9 months going through that Bible school. My wife and I got married at the semester break. And so by the time that the graduation came around, there was 35 students in that class. 34 of them by May knew what they were going to do. One did not, me. I wouldn't kick open doors. I wouldn't go knock on doors. I wouldn't go present my name to organizations. And so the leader of the school came to me and said, you have a gift to teach. It's obvious when you teach the class. And he said, you have a gift to teach. He said, you should be knocking on doors. I said, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to be faithful at what I'm doing. Right now I'm in my church. I am faithful to teach a Sunday school class. I am faithful. And I said, they're asking me to take a bigger class. Whenever a door opens up, I go teach somewhere. But I said, I don't feel like it's the time yet. And so anyway, he told me I was wrong. But anyway, they all graduated and all that. I went back for my reunion 10 years later, and out of the 34 students that had a calling or said they had a calling, only 6 or 7 of them were still in the ministry. The others had quit altogether. And my door had opened up. So when when I was there, I got a job managing an electronics store, and so my business education paid off, and for 2 years I managed a store, still wondering, Lord, what is it what you call me to do? And I would study every day, pray every day, working in our church. My wife and I helped with children's church, youth department, all these different things. How long does church go on?
4.
Okay, to 4 o'clock. Yeah, right. Okay. You can stay here till 4. I'm going to go to lunch here pretty soon. But honestly, by that time, I was still working in the church. My wife called me one day and said, there's an ad in the paper, and there's a ministry organization in Tulsa that needs somebody to run cassette tapes and radio tapes. And of course, I could do that since I managed an electronics store. I mean, I sold stereos and all this other stuff. And so I called, and the moment the lady on the other end said, Kenneth Hagin Ministries, the Lord said, that's your job. God brought it to me. Okay, but I was faithful working here and faithful working in the church. And so I knew it was for me. I went and applied for the job, got it immediately, and the salary was half what I had made at the store. And my wife had to go back to work. We just had a baby. I mean, it was a real tough time, but I knew I was in the middle of God's will. For 2 years, I worked on Brother Hagin's material, hearing about faith. I was raised around grace, but taught about faith. And my life started coming together with missing pieces coming together. But after 2 years, I kept asking, why am I here? Man, I'm struggling with a salary. Why am I here? And Brother Hagin called a meeting one day and said, we're starting Rhema Bible Training Center. The Lord said, that's why I called you here. And I didn't push myself. I kept teaching my class at church, and I kept, working in that department. And one Sunday night in my class, the dean of instructors came to my class, sat on the front row, and the next morning called me into his office and said, we want you to teach part-time at Rhema. Will you do that? I didn't even have to pray about that one, Just a moment, let me pray. Okay. That would have been my prayer. Okay. This is what I knew I had been waiting for. I called to become a teacher. And the thing was, I started out part-time, but I couldn't believe me. They actually they gave me more salary for still working in the audio department, but now teaching at Rhema. I said, they gave me an increase in salary. I didn't tell them, but I would have paid them to let me teach at the school, but they were giving me money. The next year I went full-time. The next 3 years I was full-time. The last year I was there, I was dean of instructors, and I was just having the time of my life. And while I was there, the Lord said to me, or the Lord spoke to me and said, you'll pastor one day. That's about it. You'll pastor one day. And I had this restlessness in me. You cannot listen. When the Lord is about to change your ministry, he'll put a restlessness in you. It's like he's stirring up the nest. And what I did was, as I was going out to minister at different churches on weekends from the students that were there, every church I went to, I'd say, Lord, is this the church? Lord, is this the church? Is this the one you want me to pastor? Every time it was no, 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 no. Month after month, no, no, no. I came back to the office one Monday morning after being in a number of churches, and after I taught my class, I went back to my office, laid in the carpet, slammed the door shut, and got before God and said, God, you told me one day I would pastor. And Lord, I have been from church to church to church looking. And Lord, none of them is right. Lord, what's going on? And the Lord spoke to me and said, what's the last thing I specifically told you to do? I said, teach at Rhema. He said, have I spoken since? I said, no. And I got up and realized something. I was running around looking for the will of God, and every time it had come to me. I was frustrating the grace of God by putting my finger trying to improve God's plan. So I just decided I'm going to teach better at Rhema than I've ever taught. I'm going to dig deeper in these. I've taught these classes over. I'm going to get better at this. And I just put myself in and said, if I'm here 50 years from now, I'm going to be the happiest teacher at Rhema ever because I'll be in the middle of God's will. And 3 months later, he told me I would take over the church that I was attending at that time. So the doors opened up. Just incredible things happened as God brought his will to me. One specific story, when my wife and I decided to get married while I was at Bible school, I had a job. And just, about probably 3 or 4 months before we would get married, I lost that job. They had a general layoff there, and I was part of just a mass of people laid off. And I told my fiance at that time, I said, hon, we're not going to get married if I don't have a job. I'm going to have a job. And she said, you will have a job. I mean, she already had everything printed, and everything was ready. And she said, you will have a job. So we agreed in prayer. She was dogmatic. I would have a job. So I did, I sent some resumes out, and then we had to let some people know, but nothing was happening. But I was just resting in the Lord. I was at a store one day, and standing in line to go to the checkout, and this lady was in front of me, and her son came running up, a little kid came running and said, Mommy, they have Hardy Boy books here. Anybody remember Hardy Boy books? Okay. They have Hardy Boy books here. And she said, honey, I just bought you one. He said, but I read it. And they have a whole lot more here. She said, honey, I'm not going to buy you another one until later on. And I said, does he like Hardy Boy books? She said, he loves Hardy Boy books. I said, I've got them all. I mean, I've been collecting them from the time I was little. I've read them all. I've got them back to the original ones, the classics. I said, still in the original binder. I said, he can have them all. I got boxes of them. She said, really? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't read them anymore. He can have them. And so she came by the house. I brought out these boxes. His eyes were this big as boxes of Hardy Boy books were brought out. And she looked at me and said, do you need a job? I said, yes. She said, my husband's opening up a stereo store here it's going to be a branch out of Kansas City. Do you know anything about electronics? I said, that's my hobby. Man, in college, I was hooking up everybody's stereo systems, putting headphones in and all this stuff, I said, I know all that stuff. And she said, well, he needs some salespeople. Would you like to work there? I said, yeah. I went to work there. Within 6 months, I was the manager of the store. God just opened up a door, but he brought it to me. You understand something? I was just faithful to keep doing what I was supposed to. He brought it to me. Quit running around trying to kick doors open, knock windows open. Just keep on working. God knows where you are. He knows better what will fit you. He knows better what woman will fit you, what man will fit you. He knows exactly what calling will fit you perfectly that no one else can do exactly like you. But just stand still and wait for the deliverance of the Lord. That's how it works. A verse we quoted last night, but I want to reiterate it again. Don't become weary in well-doing. It doesn't say don't become weary in sinning. Don't become weary in doing what's right. Folks, there's sometimes a tiredness that can come in just because you're doing the right thing, and you wonder, when's this thing ever going to come to pass? Finish the verse. Don't become weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap if you just don't faint. Oh, I love this verse of Scripture. We'll close on it. Luke 12, verse 43. Just listen. Blessed is that servant. Say blessed. Blessed. Blessed is that servant whom, when his Lord comes, will find him doing. What does God want to find when you approach you? He wants you to find you doing something. Again, shepherding, fishing, ushering, teaching young people, teaching students. I imagine there's probably a desk out in the church lobby somewhere or someone that can meet with you. Well, some of you already know, as I've been speaking today, there's something you could be doing in this church to be a blessing. Quit thinking they probably already filled all the positions. There's room for you. You know why there's room for you? Because the best ones who have filled that position before are not out there fulfilling the will of God, and God's looking with this open space to put you in it so you can discover His will. He'll bring it to you. Quit thinking about it. Just go to sleep. Get busy helping people. God will start out there working, manufacturing, building a ministry just for you, and one day bring it right in front of you and put it in your lap. You won't have to chase it. In fact, here's the good news. God will chase you to bring His will to you. Father, we thank you today in the matchless name of Jesus. Father, let this revelation just hit us so simply. You're looking for doers, not just hearers. And Father, when we do, you will move heaven, earth, and hell to bring the right person into our life or bring your will into our life. You've always worked that way. With every head bowed and no one looking around. When Jesus went to the cross, He had you personally in mind. Hebrews chapter 12 says this, for the joy that was set before Him, He endured the cross. You are the joy that was set before Him. When He went to the cross, He saw your face. He saw you redeemed. He saw you accepting Him. He saw you fulfilling everything you've ever wanted out of your life. He saw that. That's why He endured the cross. He could have got off the cross, but for you, He stayed there. He gave His life for you. What does He ask of you today? Give your life to me. All He's asking for you to do today is take your life and say, Jesus, I give myself to you. I accept you as my Lord and as my Savior. The moment that happens, your sins are forgiven. God will give you His righteousness. And everything I talked about today, He has a plan for every day of your life. But it starts with you just accepting it. Does anybody want to?